Hello. Good day and good morning to everyone. Welcome to DevFest Caribbean 2021, Day 5 Morning Edition. I'll be your host this morning. I'm Nicholas Mendez of GDG Port of Spain, and let's get right into what we have in store for you today. So, this is our agenda at a glance. Our first presenter will be Aaron Williams, who will be presenting on going far in 2021 with web developer stories. Then we have Yuri Camacho presenting on compose in existing projects. Asita Kone, this will be a spotlight interview, who will tell us a bit of a story about becoming an entrepreneur and no longer and dealing with issues and challenges like imposter syndrome. Then at 10:30, we have Diopol Samaru, who will be giving some insights on getting started with Flutter. At 11, we'll have Akeem Philbert, who will be giving a presentation on Jamstack. And closing us off for the morning session, we'll have Penelope De Freitas, who will be presenting on building ICT skills for professional development. So let's get right into it. We already have our next speaker lined up. So I'm pleased to welcome back again to DevFest, Erwin Williams.
Hey, morning. Hi.
Hi, Erwin. How are you doing this morning?
Good man. Good.
Awesome. So can you well, you're not new to the DevFest, but maybe you could tell us a bit about yourself for the audience who may not know you.
Sure. I am Erwin Williams from Telio Systems. I'm Chief Software Engineer there. I'm actually in Trinidad. If you're looking at the stream now, you might see the back of my veranda. Nice sunny day today, and I like this kind of opportunity to talk with other devs, to hear what people are doing around the region in particular, and maybe even contribute something meaningful. So I look for places like this, spaces where we could share in this kind of a way. And I hope it's being good for everyone. It's day 5, right, Nicholas? So things
Yeah.
have been going along swimmingly, I hope.
Yep. So far, so good. We've been going good. All right. So let's get right into your presentation. So here's Aaron Williams going far with in 2021 with developer stories.
Hi there. So I'm Owen Williams, and I want to talk about going far in 2021 with developer stories. Just as I begin, I have to admit that presenting in this format I'm still learning to do it. This is even different to what I do on a day-to-day basis because for the most part, if I'm presenting to a team, a few of my colleagues will have their cameras on. I can hear them, so it's that is I'm a little more accustomed to that. But just doing a presentation, doing a recording, I found myself changing my tone and starting to go down in my voice and talking in my chest. So I'm hoping that that doesn't happen here, and instead I'm going to pretend this room is filled with some of my colleagues, some of my family, some of everybody. I'm in a full room on a hall talking about stories, which kind of makes sense. Stories requires imagination. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and hopefully you have a good time and we learn something together. So first of all, I tell stories a lot. Part of my job is to uh, help current engineers fix some of the code I wrote while engineering solutions a few years ago. And back then, I didn't have as much interest in documenting things very properly. I was writing with my team, and everybody knew what they were doing. We had a good time. We were creating things for the first time and paying not enough attention to why we're doing what we're doing, not enough attention to writing it down properly. Or even if we did, we'd have made changes and not updated the thing. And so it became a whole thing. And so these days, sometimes an engineer would be like, hey, why did you do this in such a way? And I would either have a quick response or actually spend some time doing what I should have done years ago and writing it down so the next engineer doesn't have to depend on another engineer to sit and tell them a story. So a lot of a fair amount of my time is about that. But beyond that, because I see the value of it now much more than I did when I was younger, I've been trying to convince my team to do the same. So I'm a bit of a captain blogger. I often tell someone, did you write a blog post about that? Could you please do an article for us to explain why you did what you did? and it comes from a genuine place. I like when my team shares stories, but we'll come to that in a little bit. But the point is, I do find stories to be a lot of fun, telling them and hearing them. Now, though, my title could be a bit unfair. It feels like a bit of like an unfair joke. In 2021, very few of us could have gone anywhere. Starting with the pandemic, we were locked. We were countries' borders were locked down. We in the region, we live in islands. None of them are too that big. I mean, all right, Jamaica, okay, we see you, but not that big. Trinidad and Barbados, the rest of us, our populations are relatively small, speaking in a global context, and you could travel a lot of our countries in a day. So going far might be like too soon, too soon, too soon, too soon. Nevertheless, I hope by the time I'm done, you can kind of get a sense of what I meant in terms of the kinds of journeys that you could have gone on, that I certainly went on, and how that definitely led to me changing, which is a big part of the journeys anyway. That image you see there is of a news report of some people who I mean, quite rightly so, the population didn't quite wasn't quite pleased with them because they decided to go on a hike, and too many people grouped together in the hike during the pandemic, and it was about trying to go far, but maybe going too far, you know. But we all learned. But also, it's about developer stories, and I found myself. So to be honest, I came up with the title and even the concept before fleshing out an entire presentation. Um, Kudos to the DevFest team. I kind of been starting to look forward to these presentations, and I knew I wanted to do something, but wasn't quite sure what. So I came up with a title, had some ideas about it, but they weren't fully fleshed out. And so when I say developer stories here, I have found myself realizing that the stories themselves are building blocks. The stories themselves enable more development to happen. So it's yes, you would hear stories about developers, and yes, I'm a developer telling stories, but it's also stories are units of of growth. They're like Lego blocks, which is which is vibes, and I hope you see that too. So let's keep going. I'm going to talk about three of these kinds of stories. I think they're very different, and hopefully, you see what I mean by going far and how they are building blocks. So first one is press here. I started actually talking about press here since maybe at the top of the year. I spoke to some students at the university about why the book impacted me, and I felt, as it turns out, it it's impacted me for the whole year, to be honest. So this is a book, an interactive book for younger children. And when my wife, she goes to the library a lot, and as it turns out, when she found this book, brought it home, we all loved it. It's super simple, and as because it was so, I mean, I'm really glad for places like our National Library in Trinidad. You can just you don't need to buy everything. Just go there, borrow books, return. Really, 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 really glad for it. But this one, and so we do often do this, but this one we decided to get our own copy. And not we got our own copy because this became a family thing. This book was so cool. Aunties liked it, and they decided let's get this for the kids. So here's what the book looks like. I'm gonna just play this video just so you can get a sense of how it works. Um, I'm I don't know that I'm that much of a fan of of um what's going on in my presentation. One sec. There you go. Are you okay? Yeah, it's loading. I'm not that much of a fan of go to YouTube and have the book read. I think I need to read the book to my kids. But it's I'm glad this exists so you can see how the book works. Right? So you see off the races, they start off super colorful. You're gonna have a good time. So you press here and turn the page. The instructions are right there. And it feels like the book is just reacting to your following its instructions, which is great for toddlers who you want to learn to follow your instructions. And you can see press. the colors change, press, uh, things happen, you rub the colors, things like that, right? So when I saw that, and this wasn't the first time, this was probably after our 10th or 20th reading, made me think, hey, that's very cool. You could build on that. So this is what I built.
Hello, there. Focus here, then look to your right. Great, you got me. Now press the middle dot again. Perfect. Now, gaze at the sphere on the left until it changes a bit. Good, we're cooking with gas. Look back at the middle sphere. Well done. Now, gaze at the sphere on the right, until it changes too. Fabulous. Press the yellow now. Take a peek at the red. Finally, take a peek at the blue. Perfect. Now, look at the top red one. Nice. Now, see if you find the first yellow sphere.
So like when from my response to seeing my own creation of this thing changes all the time. Sometimes I think, so what? Other times I think are real bad. Other times I think you have plenty more to do. And so maybe you have a range of those feelings. Maybe you went from through all of those. But I didn't intend to build this when we started when you got the book, when you read the book. Maybe after the first, fifth, fourth time, I was like, this book just remains very cool. I mean, the book is still popular in my house. You read it and I think, of course, so shout out to my kids because seeing this presentation and seeing the application because they've used it, they've played with it. It's a web app. I'll share the link afterwards. Um, they've used it, and my daughter's feedback was, "Wait, you need to finish it, because that's as far as I got so far." Uh, it kind of excited them. So the idea of them seeing the book sort of come to life in an augmented reality context has driven them back to the book. My kids are pretty young. One is she'll be 5 soon, and the other is 2. I have a couple others anyway. And the the way they kind of have gone back to the book, seeing it in this presentation is it does give me a sense of joy, and it's that kind of a thing of stories building on stories. That story led to this augmented reality experience, which sent them back to the book. Very very cool. Nevertheless, I built it using. I started it off in Glitch. I think Glitch and A-Frame have been a really good combination for me. So I went up to glitch.com, found the A-Frame starting template, and just started to modify that. Had to learn a bit more about how 3JS works to kind of get it to where it's at, and plenty more to go. But I think it's been a nice way to connect those two things: the things you read with the things you experience, and back to the things you read. So that was press here. I want to talk about Fusion. And remember, we were on lockdown. And like I said, some people got both because they couldn't appreciate the importance of separating and having social distance. But of course, we were so locked down that, as I said, our visas expired, our passports expired. We couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't even use it, you know? So going for, I think, as it turns out, Fusion was a real good way of dealing with this need to get out and go into a strange place. So I want to start at the end. I participated in the Fusion Adventure Series and took about 10 hours to run through six, six, I don't want to call it hikes, but 6 hikes. And I did okay. I did okay. And sometimes when you do these things and you have a good time, you really want to capture the experience in different ways. So it was actually called Fusion Virtual 7. And this is the source story, of course, which was that for each of these jaunts through the forest, it it came with its own story. And especially for me, I didn't know those trails. I wasn't that much into hiking. I would have gone on a couple, but I'm more of a road runner. And so meeting those trails pretty much guaranteed I would fall along a few times. In one memorable time, I was in front of a friend of mine did one of the trails, and the fall was so spectacular. My glasses went so, and my jersey turned up this way, and it was a spectacular fall. I still got up and finished, but you had to expect that was happening. Along the way, though, I ensured I left voice notes for my family so they knew where I was, they knew what was happening. So, in terms of the fusion story, it actually is a collection of stories, and such a good time was had that, um, well, that's not true. I can't say such a good time. So a time was had, and let me show you what I mean with this video that sort of captures my feelings for one of these stories. You'll see some text in it. The text you see kind of represents how I felt at that moment, just to drive home that it mightn't have been a good time, but still, I think a good story emerged from it. Take a look. Oh, there you go. It's loading. So when I saw this scene in Endgame, Avengers Endgame, of Tony leaving the voice note, it reminded me about the Archean trail for Fusion. And of course, if you are watching this and you participated in Fusion, then you would probably remember that particular feeling. Nevertheless, all the runs weren't that hard. They didn't all produce that collection of words at the end. And at the end of it, they sent us this nice photo that represented, in my mind, a medal. So normally when you do these kinds of longer races, you get this participation medal, and if you're not a runner, you tend to laugh at it, thinking you just get a medal for running. But if you do run, those medals are you have a collection of them. They show that you were there, you did it, did the half marathon, or you did some 10K or 5K. And in this case, our medal, quote unquote, was the certificate of completion that I was very glad to receive. But I did wonder, is there another way to represent this? And it just came from the fact that this was a virtual set of virtual races. Yes, we physically ran, but we ran at different times. And you needed to use your watch or your phone to track it on Strava or Endomondo. Let's port one for Endomondo, of course. Uh, Track it in some way. And so what I found myself thinking was maybe we could do this, maybe we could present this in a different way, virtually speaking. Fusion at least as well, because it was a virtual series and you couldn't finish the run and normally look up at a leaderboard somewhere. You had to kind of wait until the end of the period for that particular course, and then they would send out via email the updates, which I was really glad to see they did it in this way. This is a Power BI dashboard that you could see all the results for. Very cool. And Strava held our personal data. So because Fusion held the results, Strava held the data. Those two things represented data sources for me. So I combined them and I produced this, which is a bit of a is my take on what a virtual trophy could look like. You know, it does capture the courses, and it builds on what those sort of stories are. Like I think I was telling some friends, to me, doing it in this way, well, take a look at it, right? So this is all the courses that I did, as well as the Fusion team's notes, because they would have sent out summaries of how I participated in it. Again, I have the URLs for this stuff that I provide afterwards, so you can kind of see it for yourself. So this also used A-frame, but I took a long time to figure out some of that stuff that feels very simple. But this is one of the even more meta than the one before, because this takes 6 stories and 6 maps and folds them on themselves to tell a different story, to build a different experience. And I'm hoping that maybe for all the other virtual events that we'll surely have, because I think this was pretty successful, that maybe it will actually do cause even the organizers to do something differently around how to represent the experience in a virtual context. So far, I've gotten good feedback on it from even them, so that's cool. So this is the fusion stories, the collection of stories built upon to do something new. And so let me kind of end by talking about um, actual developers who tell developer stories. And I think developer stories is a missing link for us. Stories by developers about their experience. Stories about developers making world-class things. Telios has had um, the philosophy, it's in our tagline, that we could write software here that has global impact. We no longer, I don't think we need to convince people about that today. I think a lot of that's not true. People still need to hear it. But there are many more engineers and developers either working in the Caribbean or from the Caribbean who work in other places who know that we could build amazing things from right here. But one of the things we're missing, I think, is the storytelling. We can build quirky things, even quirky jerseys like this one I'm wearing. Uh, but we need to bring those stories to the fireside. We need to share those things more, the virtual fireside. And I'm definitely glad that over the years, Telios we've been doing that. So though we've been in the pandemic and everything has been remote, uh, one of the things we were able to benefit from was something we started many years ago, and that's Telios Power Hour. So for us, Telios Power Hour has rescued us, uh, a, has been a source of salvation for us in terms of hearing from each other and telling cool stories. Um, but one of the things we we still are, I think, are trying to capture is that randomness that you would have in an office context. So Power Hour has been evolving, and one of the things we did this year was change the format internally. So even though you can go to YouTube and see some of our Power Hour episodes, even some from this year, they're very, very few compared to what we do. We have Power Hour every week. It's a hour long meeting, and the format we changed to was that in a given presentation, you can have 5 or 6 segments of teams just sharing what they did. And that has a nice, strong element of randomness to it. And that you might just ask a developer, hey, what did you guys do this week? And they'll be like, we did nothing spectacular. It was a pretty normal week. And yet when you talk, you find that, oh, this thing happened and that thing happened. So it's much more free fun, much more free form. And therefore, I think we've had fun. I think if you ask the guys at Telios, that format of telling stories definitely has been an improvement or a nice addition. We do still have our long episodes, but those are like once a month as opposed to every week. And instead, we have an hour of updates around the team. And because they're different teams at Telios, it's good to kind of hear what other guys are working on. So very, very cool. Um, but that's not the only place I've been getting stories from. And honestly, I cannot tell you what I think is the best developer story I've heard for the year. I can't because it involves internal components and it involves applications that I should not talk about on a public forum, lest my boss, who may be watching, hey, how you going, Kevin? He, he's not pleased. Nevertheless, this particular story involved two developers. Again, remember I mentioned that some of the code I wrote I no longer maintain, um, but these developers are maintaining it, and they have to figure things out as much as I might share with them. Here's how the thing works, and so they would have been figuring out how it works. And what I'm saying to them, even though I didn't do it, I'm saying to them, I need you to tell us how this thing, what you figured out. And so these guys in their bootstrapping and swashbuckling through the code came out not just with a solution to a problem they were trying to fix, but with such an epic story that it super inspired me. It felt as if the thing they made, so they fixed a problem. One. So the first story is I fixed a problem. But the second story is here's how I fixed the problem. And in choosing to tell us how, it felt as if they combined Dungeons and Dragons and applications at Telios and smooshed them together to come up with this epic tale. And it it was amazing. I was so glad for it that it caused me to hopefully, and I'm hoping this happens in 2022, so maybe I'll come back next year with an update, make a game based on their story. Because the story was a really good way of communicating how the system works. So when we hire more engineers, instead of saying, here, go read this readme that is pretty bland and there's a time and place for that, we can say, after you read the readme, let's see how much you understand with this game. I want to make a game with physical cards and doing cool things. And you slap this card down and you can't move and the system can't work. I want to do that. And that desire, that delight, it comes from the story. And so to sort of wrap things up, oh, what's going on here? There we go. Yeah. To wrap things up, um, I'm super happy for what these guys did. And uh, it gave me a whole new way of expressing uh, how a system works. And that was all because of a story. So that's it for me in terms of developer stories. And if there was a meta narrative here, it would be that even though I didn't physically go places because of these stories, in my imagination, I went on such an amazing journey that that I'm so grateful for it. And I'm looking forward to how the rest of us shares amazing stories that cause us to go on journeys we couldn't have planned to go on before. So I'm Erwin. You can get me on Twitter at iStar as my domain or my email address. So I'm looking forward to hear from you, hear your cool stories, see them in your blogs, in your articles, in your vlogs, wherever you tell them. And I hope you have a really good DevFest 2021. Cheers.
Thank you so much for that story, Erwin. The organizers of the GDGs of the Caribbean, if I may speak on their behalf, we really strong advocates and proponents for visibility and sharing stories and content creation. So I'm so happy that that was some of the motivation behind your talk. So let's get a bit into the tech stack. So you mentioned that was built in A-frame. Can you give us the audience some insight into what's that about?
Sure. So I, I like to think of A-frame as literally using all you learned about the web but to build augmented reality solutions. It's really it's tags, it's HTML, it's JavaScript. Once you know JavaScript, you can actually fall right into building VR and AR solutions that run in your browser, that could run on your phone, or even run on these VR headsets. So uh, it's to me the entry point if you want to do if you want to get started in things like virtual reality and these days what they're calling metaverse type solutions.
Awesome, awesome. So A-frame is a web platform. So that's so interesting. So we can do AR and VR all in the web browser now.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So the
So,
first
mhm.
example AR, you should have been able to see that I was in a room and those spheres were hanging in the room, whereas the other one was VR. It's the environment was completely contained. So if you have a headset and you look at that stuff, you all you see is the virtual trophy that I presented.
Awesome, awesome. That was a very impressive demos that you had there. So, what do you think is that advantage of specific, particularly web, having AR and VR experiences on the web as opposed to being tied down to these particular platforms?
So I mean, because of how robust these individual platforms are, and there seems to be continuing investment in them, I can expect that they'll be around for a while. But in terms of getting in, so for example, during lockdown, shipping for us would have been very delayed. So if you wanted to actually play with VR or AR, if you needed to depend on a platform, your shipment of an Oculus Quest or some other kind of headset may have taken a while to get here. This one is load up your browser, use your knowledge of JavaScript of HTML, and use your phone, and you will be able to at least get started, experience the start of VR solutions. I even saw recently that the idea of metaverse type solutions are making their way into the browser properly, so that you can have imagine that if you look at if you remember my demo there was the virtual trophy. The Fusion guys, for example, could put the virtual trophy as a part of the Fusion website, so that you could actually walk around a web space as opposed to a website. And as the term I saw just this week, there's much more investment in making web spaces that if you're familiar with the TARDIS, it's that
Yep,
kind of
yep.
a like you come to a web page and you think, no, you're going to get a flat experience, but really you're going to go into this whole environment that's bigger than you could have contemplated.
Yeah, I can agree more. When I first encountered A-Frame, I think one of the demos sort of is inspired like that. I just imagine like instead of having just a portfolio website, you can just have a museum where you just walk through all your apps and everything that you build. Or even not just for developers, it could be for people in design or people in the arts and craft.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think web space is going to be really a really interesting thing as that becomes more commonplace. So in your talk, you mentioned that Telios has this session called the Power Hour. Can you just give us some more insights about that?
Yeah, so literally, it's a meeting that we run where all of our engineering team can kind of get together. It's actually mandatory. We all get together once a week for an hour and talk. We share what we've learned over the last week. It's one of those things that also engineers the opportunity to practice presenting, practice talking about something beyond just the code you were writing, and that has blossomed, and so we've kind of created this space for us to learn how to present more effectively, but also this idea of providing a place for sharing these random stories about your week, and therefore the discussions that result from it. It really is an equalizing platform for us. It allows all of us to come on the same page, regardless of what each engineer may be involved in.
You know, that's really awesome to hear about. And I really hope more companies, not even in tech, spend more time or invest more time into creating these opportunities to celebrate and share the employees. I think it will do a lot for their morale as well as develop their skills, as you said. Another speaker was talking about these soft skills, and us being in tech, stereotypically we're probably not the most social people, hunched behind a computer. But these skills are, extremely
Yeah.
important. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that these days we are kind of moving away from even calling them soft skills. We are.
Of course.
It used to kind of feel like we were so denigrating that and comparing that to the harder, easier to define skills. But
Mhm.
these are, I think, are essential skills. I think you can find many people, and these, in fact, you can find systems that do a lot of the things that engineers are doing, but the ability to understand people's problems and empathize and produce meaningful, relevant solutions, that remains very much a human thing. And the more you can develop that, by a range of ways, going out and joining teams and doing things that may be out of your comfort zone, just to develop those essential human qualities, I think are critical. So yeah, definitely.
Awesome, awesome. So I want to thank you again, Erwin, for speaking at DevFest. To give more insight, you heard your the audience would have probably heard from other speakers, mentioning they have speaking 3 times, 4 times. This is the second time DevFest Caribbean has run, but GDG Port of Spain have been doing DevFest since 2018. So, we're so happy to have speakers like Erwin, Akeem, Anil, and others who are speaking like for and Obika, who are speaking for like back to back 4 years in a row now. So thanks again so much for being part of the DevFest, Erwin. Any final thoughts?
Looking forward to our developer stories, looking forward to maybe platforms that feature Caribbean developer stories. Um, and I think the Facebook group that a lot of us meet at Caribbean Developers is a good place to continue meeting and talking and hashing some of these ideas out. So cheers. And of course, thank you to my family. This presentation that you heard once today, Nicholas, they probably heard 5 times. So thank you to my wife and to my kids for humoring me.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, so thanks again, Erwin, and now gonna move on out to our next session. So our next speaker is Yuri Camacho, and he is another Google developer expert, and he's an expert in Android and Kotlin, and he'll be talking about um, staff. Well, he's a staff software engineer, and he at Rappi, and he'll be talking about compose in existing projects. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Hello, how are you? My name is Yuri Camacho. I am Google Developer Expert for Android and Kotlin. I am working in this moment at Rappi as a staff software engineer and iOS and Android tech lead for the payments and fraud team. Today I'm going to talk about composing existing projects. I think this topic is very interesting because we can have in this moment some Android applications using the traditional views, but we can add the new UI toolkit Compose into those projects. So let's start. Today, this is the agenda where we will talk about the introduction, compose an existing project. We will see a small demo, and some conclusions. Introduction. In this time that we are working on Android, the UI always was changing. This is the first UI, one of the first UIs in Android in 28. And the other will change. This was changing in the UI and how we look these screens. But the traditional way to do these screens always was the XML. But in 2019, we'll release a small UI toolkit named Compose. And I think this is the best thing that happened in the Android ecosystem. If you are an Android developer, you will see this. This is a traditional XML file to represent the UI. It's good. It's work. In this moment, it's work. We are working on that in this moment. But there are a new way to do this. And this new way is Compose. What is Compose? Compose is declarative, natural coding based on functions. In building time, reflect the state of the app. This is great. It's something like a hot reload. It's intuitive and not imperative changing of the UI. It's based on functions, as you see in this formula. Some principles of Compose. The UI are trees. That's the reason why you see many brackets like trees. The UI is as a function. Positional memorization. This is really good because you only refresh the part of the screen that you need to refresh. not all the stream, not all the view. It's based on states, and you need to use for each this, I don't know, piece of stream, a compose annotation. What is composing then? Compose is a modern toolkit for building native Android UIs. Super Compose simplify and accelerate the UI development on Android with less code, powerful tools, and intuitive Kotlin APIs. And is built by Google and JetBrains. And in this moment, is working on Android, web, and desktop, and it's great. Compose is based in React, Flutter, Lito. You know, all these frameworks or libraries are working based in functions. They're working like a trees. It's trying to resolve compatibility issues, less code. Really is less code because you don't need to work with XML. Reactive UIs. This is very, very powerful because you can work with Vue MVVM architecture or MVI architecture and enable preview on the real time, like a hot reload. Let's see example. I have a small application here. Give me 1 second. I'm going to bring my screen here. Give me 1 second. By the way, everything should be a composable. Let's see. Composing existing project. I have this this ID. If you want to create a compose application in this moment, you just need to do some this version of Android Studio. By the way, Artifox is working. This is unstable. This is stable, but this is other version. This is the beta, Android Studio beta version. Name it Bumblebee. It's very good and it's working very fine with Compose. If you want to create a new application using Compose, you just need to go to new project, and select Compose, empty Compose activity. Next, my application, blah, blah, and you will have a Compose application. You have a lot of resources on the internet and YouTube about how create a new application with Compose. But in the end, this talk is related to add to the add Compose to existing project. Let's see this presentation. Yeah. So what I need to work with Compose in an existing application. You need to do Android Studio Artifox or more, Great Plugin 7, a Min SDK version 21, Compose is interoperable, and you need to work with Compose View. We will see what is Compose View in the next minutes. You need to add in your Android in your build grade file. You need to add this flag Compose true equals true. You need to add these Compose options with the Kotlin compiler extension 1.0 release candidate 01. The compiler version is 1.510. And you need to add in this same file these libraries: runtime, UI, material, UI tooling, and app compact. Let's see the demo. This is the best part of this talk. You know, I have this application. I'm going to run the application. This application is a normal, traditional Android application. We have in this part, this is the main activity. I'm using the button navigation component, and I will comment this. and this. And I will run again. Yeah, I'm going to explain what is this. I need to. Oh yeah. Parent. It's better. Yeah. So I have this application. I'm using the XML file, traditional XML files. I have this in my home. In my home screen, I have a recycler view, constraint layout with a recycler view. And I think that's all. The idea behind this example is show you how I can add the new composable component into the traditional Android UI views. Oh, where is? Okay, it's live coding. Let's see if this work. This kind of thing happen always. No. I have some issues here, but the idea is, you know, this. I'm going to enable this again. This. So I have here my compose view. This is part of the compose library. That is the reason why I can add a composable into these XML files. I need to add here. I have some errors here, I think. Okay. And I adding building compose toolbar set content. If I'm use this part of code, portion of code, I can add the new composable component. You know, I have here a toolbar. This toolbar, what is the toolbar? In 1 second, I'm going to run again this. In this screen, all the recycler view and the navigation component are written in with XML files, but the toolbar is building in a compose. See, yeah, here. I don't know what happened with the resource, but it's okay. Maybe I can. Something is happening. I don't know why I cannot get the. Oh, here's the information, but I don't know what's happening. Let's do it again. Maybe it's digit store. Huh, it's very weird. Oh yeah, well, I know. This is the problem. Let's do it again. So I have this screen. I have the recycle view with XML files and that thing. I am adding this compose view component. This compose view, this view. With this view, I can add new composables into this screen. I can make this. I can make this mix. I have this part with XML files, and this part is a composable. if you go to the main activity, you will see that this is the navigation controller. I am adding the toolbar. The toolbar will be in all other applications. If I go to details, I have here the toolbar. If I go back, I have here the toolbar. And one thing, inside the toolbar, I have this. This is the T-shirt text. I have one icon button. This is the menu. And I have these actions. I am adding the icon button. And when the user clicks on that icon, this icon, the card icon, I will start new activity. In this new activity, and this new activity is other composable. If we go to this shopping cart activity, you will see this file is a composable. Because why? Because here I am using all composables. This is the scaffold, the top bar. The top bar is a tool, the toolbar, store toolbar, draw content. The content is a list column of shopping cart item. I'm emulating a database. I'm not using a room or other database. I have I don't know. Database is a multiple list of shift. That is the reason when I make add to cart, the share, and I will add to cart this other shirt. If I go to shopping cart, I will see this. And here, this screen is a composable. You know, it's very easy to add composables to our existing application. What I need, you just need to use this compose XML view, and you are ready for add the new composable. By the way, I have this composable. This is a sheet toolbar. Here it's my composable. And if you see, you don't need nothing. You can add the composable. It's interoperable, and you can work with both Android view bindings, Android XML, and composable view. I have all this repository in my GitHub. If you want to see how it's working, you could go to my GitHub and download this example. Let's go back to the presentation. Wait. Here. So what I was using in the example, in the Zero Store view bindings, heal, flow, retrofit in navigation, and to this application I add compose. Where I add compose in the toolbar, all this stream was built with XML, but the toolbar was composed. The same here, all this stream is composable. If you want to see the code, you could go to this QR code, or you can go to this link, and you will access to all the source code. Conclusions. It's possible mix compose with XML. It's possible you need to use compose view, and if you want to do this mix, the compose view is your friend, and you can add new screens, compose new screens into your project. There are some reference if you want to learn more about compose or I don't know, use composing your existing projects, please go to these references and may the composables be with you. Thank you so much for your attention. And if you want to contact me, ask me something about this example or something about Android or Kotlin, please. My Twitter account is Camacho Yuri. Here, Camacho Yuri. This is my Twitter account. If you want to ask me something about this presentation, about anything, please contact me on Twitter. Thank you so much and continue enjoying this amazing DevFest. Bye. See you another occasion, another event.
Awesome. So let me just fix this. Yui has been having some technical difficulties, so I'm not sure if he'll be able to join us for the Q&A. But generally, what he talked about is a pattern for approaching building UIs in Android applications. Traditionally, in Android applications, you would have to rely on markup for composing and creating your UI. But we have seen a new movement in the web frameworks that really leading the charge. Frameworks like React, Vue, and I guess even Angular at some point, some extent, and even Flutter, where we want to create components out of our UIs. We like these reusable components that could set state between each other. So what I believe is this presentation is mainly about how that works in Kotlin and Kotlin for building Android applications. So our next speaker, just give me a moment here. Carded now is Asita. Just need to get this up. Change that one. Just give me a moment. Let me rearrange some things. All right. Sorry about that delay. Our next speaker is a spotlight interview with Asito Kone, and we will gonna get right into it. Hi, good day, everyone. So for this talk today, I have with me Asito, and she'll be presenting on her session entitled "Since I Became an Entrepreneur, I No Longer Have Imposter Syndrome." So, hi, Asito, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
So can you just tell us a bit about yourself?
Okay, so my name is Asiton Kone. I'm from Martinique, which is a little French island near to, I don't know, maybe in Trinidad and Tobago, in this area, Caribbean area. And I'm actually a web developer. So I've been a web developer for about 10 years, professionally, let's say 7 years. I'm specialized on dev front-end development, but today I'm doing everything front-end, back-end, machine learning, DevOps.
Awesome,
And I'm very passionate about coding.
Awesome, that's great to hear. It's always great to hear from another Caribbean developer. So you said your talk is about becoming an entrepreneur. So can you give us a bit of a background about your company?
Yeah, so I created a product that helps people to learn to code or to get better at coding. And there are two parts. The first part is really about visualize the problem with comic strips, and also you will have a chatbot that will help you to understand the complex concept of programming. So programming, data science, what is important actually in programming, because I really love coding challenges, and I really love to help people, especially Black women, to help to get into code, because today is very complicated for us, especially for women. We are really a minority in this area.
That's so awesome. That's so interesting to see you have this mix of diversity, inclusion, and you have tech and education and the machine learning. That's really interesting. I'm looking forward to your talk. So I guess without further ado, you can get right into it.
Yes, totally. And when I was in the industry, so in the beginning, when I was a junior, I was very passionate. I had so many possibilities, but I got bored very quickly, and it was very complicated to. Very complicated to get better, because I had to do. So I was very passionate about learning to code, learning to do some challenges, but I got bored easily, and I started getting experience, but I was frustrated at work because I could feel that my work wasn't very valued, like I'm not good enough. And my last experience was pretty bad. I wanted to quit programming to be a web developer, because I could feel that something was wrong, but I didn't know if it was me or just the industry. So I had time to think about it and ready to see what could be my possibilities. So I was very interested in machine learning for a long time, and I started to go back to mathematics and really to understand the concept. I was very thrilled about it. And finally, I had this idea, maybe I think for 3 years, to create like the school, code school, and try to combine it with actually artificial intelligence. I think it would be interesting to add something to help people, but in real time, because I know that when you are coding, sometimes you are you can feel stuck and you don't know what to do. And I just told myself, if I am able to create like a little robot, sorry, to help people to, you know, to get better, it could be interesting. So what's hard, sorry, is the fact that I had to do all myself, the website, so the dev front part, the backend part, and so the deployment, so DevOps. And really, this is a time when I told myself that I'm strong, I'm a very good programmer, coder, whatever, because I was able to do all of this on my own, and this is very a difficult task. So I was in this time just I remember the time was I started getting this imposter syndrome, uh, and finally I just say no, I'm good enough and I'm pretty good and I can actually give some courses to people. And this is why I'm going to create some workshops to be able to create something to put on GitHub, because for me it's super important to put a project on GitHub to be able to get a job. So I'm going to create workshops on it, and because I'm able to do it and because I have the level. And I know that if I was just an employee, I wouldn't have this thought, because for me before that I wasn't good enough. And today, being an entrepreneur, every day I'm coding, every day I have an idea. I'm doing front end, back end, different thing, machine learning. I know that I'm very good at coding and this is my thing. So being an entrepreneur is super hard. You are alone. I have integrate. I am in an incubator for women, so this is very helping, but I'm still alone doing my own projects, and I'm not saying this is the way to stay in IT, but it could be a solution to find what is very good for you, because sometimes you're working on the project for your boss, but you can think that the project is not very interesting. But if you can find a side project, for instance, starting getting something bigger and bigger and trying to present it to the world, maybe it could be you can create your startup like me. So I'm not saying that today I don't have this thought about, yes, maybe I am an imposter, but it's really almost done in my head. Really, I think I need to keep going, and I'm gonna do something very big for my community too, for Caribbean people, and especially for Black women in the tech.
Yeah, that is a really amazing story, Asitok. So you mentioned that you had all of this, you've seen all of this hostility from the workspace, being a minority, and I was just wondering, how do you manage to still believe in yourself, to still undertake this huge venture, just by yourself?
Well, it's kind of difficult, but the fact that I can do my project, I think, and talk to other people, talk to other Black women like me, it's easier to keep going, really, because I was sometimes one time I was the only woman in the startup and only Black. And for me, it was super hard, and I knew that it could be a problem. And eventually, yes, it was a problem. I was really different in this company, and they decided, they say, okay, you have a good web developer, but the cultural fit is not there, and I was super frustrated because I didn't understand why. I mean, yeah, maybe the fit isn't there, but at the end of the day, my work was good, but something was missing. And at this moment, I was like, okay, this is my fault, this is me. But I talked to other Black women, and they said the same thing. And this is the time I can say, okay, I'm not crazy. There is something very wrong in the industry.
Yes, I would agree. I think the issue really stood with that the company wasn't really amenable to a more diverse workspace, and that I think, in my opinion, the company really loses out. Especially in your case, they lost out on an amazing developer. So I think that's why we should always have these conversations of diversity and inclusion, because it's just generally better for the industry. So you
Yes.
mentioned that you have been working so mainly alone in your journey, but I was just happy to hear that how mentorship played a great part. So, and if you could just speak more on how you were able to discover and reach out to these mentors, or how did you engage with them?
It's kind of complicated today. We don't have a special group for Black women here, but we have groups for women in general, but it's different. And I think it would be great to create something. I have this idea to create a kind of a meeting for, like a branch for only Black women to talk about those things. But it's difficult because in France, they don't like us to be together. For them it's kind of weird. So we can do meetups or just eat together, but today is kind of difficult to have this kind of thing. It's just about, okay, I have a friend, a Black friend in tech, and another friend, but that's it. It's not a big thing.
Right, right. Well, I do know that there are some communities, so certainly locally we have Women in Tech Caribbean, and we have speakers from there. And I believe there's one on Twitter, but I can't remember the name exactly, if it's Black Women in Tech. So it's great to
Yes.
see that they are making some strides for these communities to come together. I know it's on a more global base, it's more digital, I guess. And in light of the
Yes.
times that we're in, so they're having more digital events, but that just means there could be more participation, right? So and again, we're going back to the point of how you've mainly been working on your own, but do you see a future where if you find a suitable partner, you'll be able to expand, share the work a little bit more, or do you mainly see yourself just going forward as a solo?
I really don't know yet. I'm just experiencing, and it's complicated to say, okay, I want to do this or do that. It's just experiencing and share what I can do, find any ideas also. And I just want to help people because I received some messages, okay, how to get into code, and really I try to develop my own method actually to help, because there are classes on videos or just articles, and I want to make out of it, and also to be able to explain lines of code, what is complicated to understand really, not just to say on the, try to be deep actually. Okay, what is the goal of this line of code, and what we can do with it.
Great, great. So you mentioned, the main theme of this talk is, overcoming that imposter syndrome. So do you see mainly for you is fighting against the narratives and coming up with your own projects and achievements would have been your main mechanism of doing so?
I think it's more about, I think the fact that imposter syndrome is always about, okay, it is your fault, it's a problem, and I I found a solution, but maybe the problem also maybe the company, the boss, and yes, I found kind of a solution to not to stay in the IT, but maybe we can say your boss is the problem, because I remember my boss gave me something to do. It wasn't in my my skill. I mean, I didn't know what to do, how to do this. But he said, "Okay, I can trust you. You can do this." But no, I couldn't, and I started having this thought I'm not good enough. And now I can say it was my boss' fault. It wasn't my fault, because he knew that I didn't do that in the past. It was a new skill to do, and really new skill to have. Sorry. And I think we need to change the narrative. It's not about us. It's about what they want us to do, and maybe it's not possible.
It's a really interesting perspective. I do think that the work and organization culture can play to a large extent to the imposter syndrome. Do you have people who are willing to help you, willing to mentor you, and be patient and guide you through things? I think really goes a long way. As we talk, I really enjoyed this talk, and I want to thank you so much for being a part of the DevFest. Can you just give the audience more information about your company and where we can find you on social media?
Okay, so my startup is called Histoire. So the name you can see code. So just code. Histoire is Creole, so Martinican Creole, which means histoire, story. And you can find me on. So I have a website, and on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and also on on YouTube. So you can find sorry, you can find us everywhere. Sorry.
Awesome, no problem. So yeah, thanks again, and we'll definitely share those links with the audience, and we would see you at your next talk.
Okay, thank you very much. See you next time.
Okay. All right. That's a great talk by Asita. And we'll be seeing her again in the afternoon track with a second talk, which is more technical, and it's a really interesting demo. So I hope you look forward to it. Next on the agenda, let me just get this back on stream. Right, we have Leopold Somaru, who is apprentice developer at V75 Inc., coming out of Guyana, and he's going to give us a run through getting started with Flutter. So we have Leopold in studio, and we'll be happy to welcome him on. Welcome, Leopold. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry,
Hi,
thanks for
morning.
having me. Good
How are you?
morning. I'm good so far. What about you?
I'm going okay. So can you give us a bit introduction about yourself?
Okay, I'm Diapol Samwaru. I'm from Guyana. I'm currently stationed at V75 Inc. I'm an apprentice developer and I deal mainly in mobile app development, specifically in Flutter. Um, I got into programming, I'm actually self-taught, and So, I my field of study actually is biology, and during the pandemic is when I started to get into tech, and I got myself out there and actually landed an apprenticeship. So it's been going great so far.
Wow, well, that's an amazing story. So, just to be clear, your tech career, you would say you're early in your developer journey.
Pardon me?
Would you say you're somewhat early in your professional developer journey? Are you? This is your where you are now. This is where you started 2 years ago.
Uh, you're breaking up a bit on my
Oh,
end. Could you?
sorry about that. So this the place where you are now. This is your first position in your professional career.
Yes, that is correct.
Awesome, and that's just 2 years ago, if I heard that correctly.
Yeah, it's getting on to 2 years.
Awesome. That's actually really amazing that you're able to land this position. It kind of shows your ability to get up and going, and it's interesting. You transition from biology into tech.
Yeah, it's been amazing, man. I've learned new things. I've met new people. I can't complain.
That is so cool. So would you say, given that we always hear, and it's always good when we talk about computing and technology, it's always good when we marry it with other domains. So do you see yourself positioned to take on unique problem spaces given your biology background?
Yeah. So for one of the things what I want to focus on, it's mostly in developing the way we gather data. So I've so when I got into tech, I decided that I wasn't going to completely shut off my biology background. I was going to find a way to mesh the two. So one of the ways I came up with was to find more efficient ways of data gathering. So that gets into the realm of drone technology and using it to render that data, data analysis, things like that, using AI. So yeah, at least that's one of the things I want to get into. I also want to build different utilities that just generally make life easier. And as you know, well, you may or may not know, the app development scene in Guyana is relatively young. And I see lots of potential for us to digitize quite a lot of things that are still analog here. So yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Because that makes a lot of sense, and I'm happy to hear that. Because when we had a talk about AI in agriculture, and one of the points that Fuzia, our speaker, mentioned is getting that quality data collection methods. So it's cool that you have that insight on the bio, which would be able to help them make that journey into properly doing data gathering, and you could see a lot of innovation.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I'm happy that it's also getting into different fields as well. And it makes life generally easier, makes it faster and cheaper as well.
Great, great, great. So now we're gonna get into your talk without further ado. Here
Awesome.
we have your whole talk getting started with Flutter.
All right. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Diopol Samwaru, and I'm currently an apprentice developer at B75 Inc. And today I'm here to get you started with Flutter. So before we get into it, let me go through the introductions. So who is Diopol? Well, my name is Diopol Samwaru. I am from Guyana. I'm 23 years old. Um, what do I do? Well, currently I am a apprentice developer at V75. I focus mostly on mobile app development, specifically with Flutter. How did I get into programming? Well, for the longest while, I've always been interested in programming. Fun fact: I studied biology at the University of Guyana. I know, but I've always been curious about programming, but I've never had the time to do so. And when the pandemic hit, and everyone was home, I thought to myself, well, they probably might as well do something productive with this time that you have. And I started to get into programming. And at that time, I noticed that a lot of persons were putting out COVID-19 stats on Facebook and places and different social medias. And I wanted to develop something that would get all those stats for Guyana in one place. And that's how my curiosity my curiosity turned into something that I actually pursued. Um, which was starting to develop applications and learning to actually program. So I developed a web application that basically tracked the stats of GAN and presented it to users. From that, I wanted to get more into programming. So the next step was mobile app development. At least that is what I wanted to do. So I thought to myself, well, what is something that you want to build that would be some that people would utilize? And the first thing that came to mind was a radio app. And that's the path I took. I built a radio app. Now, for me, what I did, I did it natively, for Android, and I once it got onto the Play Store, it started to pick up some traction, and I realized to myself, well, hey, people on iOS would probably appreciate this too. And so naturally, what I did next was look into, well, how do I get my Android app onto the Play Store? And that is when I hit my first speed bump. I realized I needed to build the app essentially from scratch using Swift for it to be able to go onto the the App Store, and people could use it. And so me, I was quite lazy at that time. I googled uh, how do I quickly convert my Android app into an iOS app, and naturally I didn't find any good solutions. So the next thing that I did was Google. Well, first I thought to myself, well, Paul, you're probably going to build more apps in the future. You should probably find a solution to this quickly. So the next thing I Googled was how do I build both iOS and Android apps using the same code. And sure enough, cross-platform development showed up, and the top two were there, Flutter and React Native. And I started to do my diligence, and I found, well, based on what I would have researched and found out, Flutter was the better choice because of performance and the freedom you get with UI and such. So with that being said, I started to put whatever I was doing out on social media, and Eldon Marks, who is the CEO of V75, he saw what I was doing, and he reached out to me, and that is how I got an internship, and now I'm an apprentice. So yeah, and from that I would have honed my skills and improved significantly. And so that goes to the next question: how long have I been doing this? And I would say at this point it's been, well, the duration of the pandemic, really. So what that was like 2019 going on to 2020, about 2-ish years now. Yeah, around that. So enough said, let's get started. So first I'm going to give you a brief introduction into, well, what Flutter is really. So Flutter is a cross-platform mobile UI framework developed by Google. It enables you to create native mobile apps for both iOS and Android using one programming language. Essentially, to put it short, it's a 2-for-1 special that is free for use. Free for use meaning, well, in this case, it's open sourced. Now, benefits of Flutter. So the big one, it reduces development time. Simply put, because you use one code base developed for both iOS and Android, which also means that the time it takes between conceptualizing development and putting it out in the market is quite short. So the turnover rate is fast. It has similar native app performance, meaning, well, obviously it's not going to be the same as a native app, but it comes very close. And in most cases, it's usually faster than React Native, that is. Since it uses the same code base and BL for all platforms, BL being business logic, all platforms being, well, Flutter isn't exclusive to iOS and Android anymore. You can also do web and desktop apps as well. So you use the same code base, which means with limited tweaks, which means you essentially cut your development time significantly. You don't need to build these independently anymore, which also means that your development team can be smaller as well. You don't need dedicated developers for Swift and Android. Now, it also has, well, it has web and desktop support, as I would have mentioned before. It also has a large following. Now, to put this into perspective, Sometimes you run into an issue and you can't seem to find what's the case, so you copy that terminal code and you put it into Google, and good old Stack Overflow comes up with a possible solution. Well, that's it. The likelihood of you finding a solution to your issue is very high because the community is quite large. So chances are someone else would have encountered the same issue that you would have, and they would have put it out there, and someone would have supplied some sort of fix for that. Also, it has lots of dependencies and packages. Now, those eliminate the use for eliminate you having to do lots of boilerplate code. So the good thing about the packages is they're literally in the thousands. You can get a package to make your app bar look fancy, even your navigation bar do things such as location uploads, picking an image, putting it on your backend, things like that. It also has its own rendering engine, which is good, especially for your UI, which also enables you to do quite a lot, making your UI quite unique. And so Flutter uses Skia, the Skia engine, for its rendering, which means that the UI adapts to suit its platform. So you won't find that they look exactly the same between Android and iOS, which is usually a common issue with cross-platform frameworks. Now, after hearing all of this, you're probably wondering to yourself, well, how do I get started with Flutter? So I've put together a small chart to show you the different steps, and I'll take you through them. So first, you would want to download the Flutter SDK, after which you want to update your path. Now, your path is just to allow you to use your command prompt. And then you want to install Android Studio. Now, this isn't absolutely necessary, but it sure does make the installation process quite a lot easier, so because it allows you to get the various SDKs and such in, and makes it much more easier to update. Now it isn't, as I would have said, it's not absolutely required. You can use VS Code, but it does take a bit more time. So I usually prefer to go with Android Studio to get my SDKs updated and installed and such. After that, you want to install your Flutter plugin, and you also need to install the Dart plugin as well, because Flutter uses the Dart language. And also from that, you just begin your development. So first, I'll take you through how to get started with Windows, and then I'll take you through Mac. So the first thing you want to do is go to flutter.dev to install the SDK. So you get started, you get the welcome screen, you get started. A thing to note is, so you select, in this case, you're going to select Windows. So there are two tools that Flutter requires, and that is PowerShell, which comes pre-installed in Windows 10. And you need Git as well. Now, the good thing about I'm not going to go through Git, because it's simple. It's as simple as downloading the git.exe and running it, and that's the end of it. No other steps involved. And after that, you want to install your Flutter SDK. And now I would have already download and install this bit already. It's just a matter of extracting that file into a directory. It will always, once you use here, it will always download the latest stable version of Flutter. And yep, from that, let's get started. So I placed my Flutter folder inside of my desktop just for easy access. Now, what you want to do next is to open your CMD. So I just want to show you what will happen. So if you were to type in Flutter, you will get this error, which is it doesn't recognize that command. So what you need to do next is update your path. So to do that in Windows, what you want to do is to edit your environment variable for your account. So once you click on that, this window pops up. Now, what you want to do here is highlight path, and then you click edit. Now, to do this, you would go back to your directory where you would have installed Flutter. Open that up and click on bin. Now, what you want to do is copy the location of that. So once that is copied there, you go back into your edit environment variables, and you click on new, and you just add that in, click OK. Now, once that is already done, you click OK, and what you want to do is to restart your CMD. Now CMD, and if I type Flutter here now, the commands should work. So Flutter, as you can see, it's taken a while, but commands work. There we go. And what you want to do is to type Flutter Doctor, and that will let you know if you're missing anything. From that, what you want to do is going to, let's just wait on Flutter Doctor and see what it says. There we go. It shows me whatever is missing here. So right now my command line tool is missing and my Android license is unknown. So it also suggests how to fix them. So I would just need to run these two commands, which is to update my command line tool, and I would also need to accept my Android license. Now, after that is done, what you need to do is go into plugin. Now, I have already installed the plugins, but when you open up your Android Studio, the latest version is Arctic Fox. Can't recall the exact version, but it will look exactly like this when you open. You click on plugins and you type Flutter. And that should pop up there. And once you click install, it will also prompt you to install the Dart plugin as well. And once that's installed, it will tell you to restart your IDE, which is your Android Studio. And from that, you can create a new Flutter project, and you're well on your way to developing. So you can, the first thing most people do is make a to-do app. If you feel adventurous, you can go more, you can go larger, do something else. As you get into it, you'll learn about APIs, developing backends. Most people tend to use Firebase because of the easy integration. Yep, and that's about it with getting started with Flutter. I will head over and show you how to do it for Mac. So Mac, the setup is pretty much the same in terms of downloading the SDK. Now, when you get to when you get started, instead of selecting Windows, you select Mac. And it's the same process. You ensure that you have Git installed. You don't need PowerShell anymore. And you install your SDK in whatever directory that you can easily access. And then the way you do it for path is somewhat different. So the first thing you would need to do when you're setting it up is you would want to open your terminal. So to open your terminal, you want to click space command and space simultaneously. Search box will appear, and then you would just type terminal. You open up your terminal. You run this command, which is vim /.shrc. Then your path will open up. You will click on I and enter to edit your path. And what you want to do is copy and paste this command. Now, where it says pwd in quotes, you want to add the location of your Flutter SDK. In my case, it would be this, which is c/user/somewhere/OneDrive/desktop, and then it already has the Flutter/bin, And after that, it's just a matter of clicking escape and WQ exclamation mark enter, and you restart and you're ready to go. Now, yep, and you're well on your way to run your commands: flutter pub get, flutter create, flutter clean, everything. Yep, and that's about it from me today. Thank you for coming to my session. Hope you at least took something away from it.
Such an awesome presentation, dear Paul.
Thank
So
you.
you've had programming experience prior before jumping into this Flutter stuff, right?
That is correct. Yeah.
But what I wondering, someone who, with your level of experience, what was your advice to people who, like you, want to make that transition over tech, but then they think they need to, they have different ideas. Tech is so diverse. There's so much ways to get in, so it can be understandably very overwhelming. What would your advice to them?
Okay. So someone once told me tech is like building blocks, and you can make anything you want with it. You just need to understand it first. And like most things, yes, it is overwhelming when you look at it from afar, but you need to get into it gradually. If you don't make that first initial step, you're always going to be reluctant. So for me, I started off with the very basics. I well, I'll tell you the honest truth. When I first got into like Flutter, I would Google almost anything and everything. I At this point, I can handle myself. I go to Google when it's absolutely necessary, but I would Google how to create a row in Flutter, how to create a column. So which I'm not proud of, but like I think that would be the experience for most people. You need to get into it and actually start to code. Looking at tutorials and reading documentations is good, but at the end of the day, theory and practical are two different things. Well, me personally, I learned by experiencing. So I got into it, and I said, well, hey, I want to build this particular app, which was already up. What do I need to do? The first thing I need to, well, select the language, which is Flutter. I need to figure out how to get that set up, which I ran through different videos, read blogs and such. I got that in. Then, well, the next thing I needed to do was I need to create a home screen. So I got about how to do different rows, how to put a background in, and that is how I learned. So I think that is how well, at least that is how I would suggest other persons get about. You identify a goal that you're trying to get to, and then research or look up how to, and don't be afraid to ask for help, because there are lots of people in the community that are willing to help you. So yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I think just find a problem that annoys you and say, I'm going to figure out how to solve it with tech. And
Yep.
one thing I would say is never be ashamed to Google, right? Google
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
friend in developers, no matter how simple it is. I would Google the most simple things because it's just quicker to type than it is even just to remember from my brain. It's like I'll
That is
type it
very
up, say,
true.
actually know it, I know this. So yeah, I think Googling and knowing how to research, and that is a very important skill in itself as a developer, being able to research, being able to discern the Stack Overflow solutions. We don't know if it does work, and fit it in an experiment. So happy you're able to share that part of the experience. So your platform of choice here was Flutter in your demonstration, and it's really popular. It's a cross-platform, and you're able to even build an iOS and Android. So I was wondering if you could share a bit of your experience with setting up on the Mac side of things, because understandably there's some costs. When you usually go the Apple route, there's some costs incurred. So you have to get things like a Mac station, Mac workstation. So you could just give a bit of a background with that.
Okay. So you want how to set up on like equipment and everything, or
Yeah,
just
like what does it entail? Maybe give an idea of the cost if you want to be able to build Flutter for iOS. The licensing, what's happening.
okay. All right. So for get started with Flutter on Mac, really and truly don't necessarily need equipment. Like I know some people use They use the emulators where you can have Catalina or whatever on your Windows system. Now, really, to be honest, once you have that Mac OS opened, be it you can probably buy a MacBook Air. Well, I would suggest a Pro or a Mac Mini, which I use, and they're in the vicinity. Like you can get a really good one, like from 2012 upwards, somewhere in the vicinity of 599 upward. I was fortunate enough to get to well, I was loaned one from V75, so I use that since it's much easier for me. And so to get started, it's pretty much the same way. You once you get that Mac OS open, you want to first download the Flutter SDK, um, and you run through the same steps that I would have highlighted. The only difference is in the path, and that's it for that end. Now you would need Xcode as well because as much as Flutter is really great, to get it onto the App Store, onto test flight and the app store, you still need to deploy it using Xcode, so you would need to download Xcode as well. And when you want to launch an app onto test flight, onto app store and play store, they're very different, so you need your developer license. So on the Google end, it's a one-time fee of $25, I believe, and you can upload as many apps as possible. And for the iOS end, it's a yearly fee of 99 US dollars. And from that, you can upload your apps onto the App Store there. If it's more involved, if you're a single person, it's easy to sign up for a developer license on iOS. But if you're an organization, you need to get your DUNS number and things like that. So yeah. But in terms of setting up Flutter, it's just a matter of getting a Mac. Um, choose something that has good performance. Well, with Mac, they are performance based, and you run through the same steps as you would with Windows. Just the difference is how you set up your path, and yeah, you're all set to get started with Flutter.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So, I'm wondering, you talk a bit about the mentorship and the help you've got. Are there some communities you've reached out to, some forums that that really helped you along your way in your implementation?
Um, for me, like locally, it was V75. Well, it started with Nexus Hub, which is the non-profit arm of V75, and I interacted with different developers and such, and they give me pointers. Um, one of the ways I learned was we would if we're building an app, they would give me a task and have a time frame to have it completed, and that is how I learned on that end. Otherwise, I wouldn't have interacted with any other group locally or overseas based. It was mostly YouTube. It was me googling whatever issues I had. I would go to Medium or Stack Overflow for help, and sometimes, well, most cases the documentation does help when you run into certain issues you can't seem to find an issue, any help with. And Reddit as well. You'd be surprised, but a lot of persons are willing to help you on Reddit.
Great, great, great. And I remember in your story, it was very interesting how you would just put your work out there and you were basically scouted from V75, right?
Yes, that's correct.
That's excellent. So that's a good testament of why we need to tell our stories, why we need to document our journey, even though we're now starting off, because it's so cool. Like I could definitely tell that the person who's counting here has an eye for talent. They really know what they're doing in terms of running a business and selecting skills and adding to their pool. Um, and I think that's a really important part, especially in when scouting entry level talent, or people who are earlier in their career. So can you tell me more about V75 and what they do?
Okay, so V75, well, it's a local tech company. They work along with Clink, where they create conversational AI experiences for different companies overseas based. Um, so conversational AIs are they basically you can chat with it and it gives you different responses based well, it would based on use case, so you can chat with a conversational AI that gives you insight on different products and such. And along with that, V75 also provides different tech solutions locally as well, website development, app development, things along that line. There's also the nonprofit of V75, which aims at developing the talent pool here locally. So it gives apprenticeship opportunities to different young budding developers to hone their skills, experience, give them expose them to the workforce and things along that line. They also offer training as well. As of they have this Nexus U arm, which they have right now. I believe they have a gaming course that is going on where they're teaching youngsters how to develop games, which is pretty cool. And they have different courses to teach you different things. So yeah.
That's so awesome. I've heard of Nexus Hub before and see that they're doing really interesting things. So it's so good to hear there's so much fun and innovation happening right here, right there in Guyana. So happy to hear that. So, dear Paul, thank you so much for your talk. Welcome to the DevFest. Do
Thank
you
you.
have any last thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
Not particularly. But well, I guess this one would go out to anyone that wants to get into tech. Just get into it. Take that leap. Um, you'd be surprised at what you're capable of. Don't ever doubt yourself. You're humans are capable of many great things. It's just a matter of taking that first step towards achieving it. And some again, I'll reference something someone told me. It's not when you make big achievements and great and you achieve some sort of greatness, it isn't because you step out to achieve that. It is a byproduct of what you set out in your life goals, what you want to achieve for yourself, and whatever great thing that happens comes as a byproduct of your endurance and your determination. So yeah.
Excellent. It's all about the journey. So thanks again, dear Paul, and
Thank
we
you.
will see you in the next one.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
So for our next talk, we have Akeem Filbert, who will be speaking on the Jamstack. It's entitled "We Jamming. I Wanna Jamstack with You," and this is the founder from WePala. So I would like to once again welcome to DevFest, Akeem Filbert. How you doing, Akeem?
ID. Morning, morning. Are they trying to get me in trouble? And this is supposed to be Christmas cleaning.
Oh boy, oh boy. Nevertheless, happy for you to join us yet again for another DevFest talk. So maybe you could give
Nice, nice.
a background and introduction of yourself to the general audience.
Sure, sure. My name is Akeem Philbert, and I am the founder of Wipala, a technology solution company that makes everything from websites to mobile apps, anything in tech, we in it, so that we operate in the US as well as locally. And it's been great to be a part of the local community, to build and awesome things that we share, whether it's on our podcast or with the different organizations that we're involved with. Um, so yeah, that's a basic background.
Great, great.
I have a
And
nice Google friendly name, so
all right, great, great. Yes, you can definitely find about WePal and all the exciting products and initiatives. I must say, Akeem is very active in the local community, whether it's the Caribbean Developers Facebook group or through his own the own Link We podcast. So, if you could talk about that a little bit.
sure. That is actually a great story because last year's this year I was a part of the DevFest talk, at least the virtual one, because I've done others in person as well. And just seeing what a great platform this was, we were like, all right, it would be great to have more of these conversations throughout the year with the community, so that we started a kind of low tech, I say that every morning, that is decidedly low tech podcast on Wednesdays, and we just kind of talk about what's going on in tech, because throughout the year all kind of things happening in tech. So that is just to kind of get a perspective. And this was an awesome year for tech, right? You had Copilot, you had all the hype of metaverse, you had, so that really, really was a good year of conversations. And yeah, this was definitely the start. So it's been great.
Yes, and I must say, Linkui has become a part of my weekly ritual of some sort. It never stops serving me kind of interesting topics and discussions you'll manage to have so consistently every week. I don't think you'll missed a week, right?
Yeah, no. We miss a week yet, although that might change soon. I tell you, I had to get our Christmas cleaning done sometime.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, no, and I think I would love to take credit for it, but I can't because it's been great to have guests, really awesome guests, yourself included. You have the distinction of being on the show the most, um, and I think it's those conversations that really keep the show going. And learning something new every week is interesting because it's not always like, hey, we know this stuff. So that we would have to go and do research and kind of delve into something new on some shows, I talk about things that I typically would have a opposing view to, but being forced to look at it again and get a fresh perspective has been great. So yeah.
awesome. So without further ado, let's get Akeem's talk started.
My name is Hakeem, and today we're talking Jamstack. I want to start by talking a little bit about the state of development. If you've had to make a website, you would know that it does take some time. You could use a content management system like WordPress to help out, but with it's still going to take some time and effort to get done. If you're looking to do anything beyond the basics, you're looking at even more time. So if you're going to be making some kind of website for e-commerce, you can use things like WooCommerce and Magento or any other of the various systems that are out there. But it's a non-trivial task to deploy and set those things up. You have to find a server, you have to provision the server with the server-side runtime, you have to understand the dependencies and get those set up. Once you launch your site, that's not the end of your troubles because you have to also figure out updating the server. You have to make sure the language is properly patched. You have to make sure you're using the latest version of whatever you decided to use so that your application remains safe and secure. You also have to think about scalability after success because these applications aren't necessarily built to scale. So you have to either figure out how you're going to tune it to get more performance out of it, or you have to figure out how you're going to scale horizontally and balance the load. Now, people expect great experiences and they don't really care what goes on behind the scenes to deliver it. So that you set up this, you have this cool cluster with your application, doesn't matter to them. They just want to know that it loads quickly and it does what it's supposed to do. A typical freelancer flow would be, hey, see a project, you figure out, yeah, that looking like it in my wheelhouse. You get the job, you refine the quest, you ask more questions, try to find something that matches what is being asked. And if you get it, you customize the solution, you put it on a server to test and for the client to see, and then you do some testing. If it is that you do find something that matches what you want, then yeah, you might have to build something. Either way, you're spending some time, and depending on the route you went, you're looking at some complexity, and this leads to high costs in development. That's especially a problem within our region where budgets are a little bit different from the international market. Now, when you look at an application, it has three common parts, loosely speaking. You have a view or interface where the user inputs information and commands. You have a model that handles the data and applies business logic. And you have a controller that is kind of like the traffic cop between the two. Now, in the olden days, those components would be on a mainframe system, and that would be housed at a university or some within a company. And the user would go to the application. They would go to the mainframe to use the application. Then there was a shift to the desktop model where the application lives on a personal computer wherever the user is. The problem here has been that there's a variety of operating systems and CPU types, so it's difficult to make a good cross-platform application. We shifted applications to the cloud, where the application would live on a web server and the user would access it through a web browser. And that has been working really great. JavaScript APIs and markups is like the next step in that evolution, such that there is a decoupling of the view from the model and controller. Your view being done in JavaScript and markup, and your model and controller is what comprises the API. So Jamstack is a term coined by Matt Billman and Chris Bach of Netlify to describe an architecture where application views are decoupled and pre-rendered. An example of a Jamstack app might be an e-commerce site that is using, let's say, Vue Storefront for the view and using a checkout API, a payment API, and a content API. In tech, we love acronyms. So MACH is another way to describe this architecture. It's microservice-based, API first, cloud native SaaS, and headless. So it's really emphasizing the API aspect of this architecture. Microservices is an architecture that structures an application as a collection of services. And these services are often domain driven, so that you might have an API or a service for search, you might have a service for content management, you might have a service for payments.
Oops, sorry, gotta pause this one. We just have another version of this video. This is it here. Let's see if we get that back.
Hi, my name is successful and deliver computer, and the user would have to go and controller make up what we call an API. Jamstack is a term coined by Matt Billman and Chris Bach of Netlify to describe this decoupled view architecture. Let's take a look at an example of this. So this is a e-commerce website running on Vue Storefront, and it could be using a checkout API to manage the checkout flow, a payment API, and a content API. In tech, we like acronyms. So another way to refer to this is MACH, microservices-based API first cloud native SaaS and headless. It's really doubling down on that API first approach. Now, microservices is an architecture that structures an application as a collection of services. And these services could be domain driven, so that you might have an API for search, you might have an API for content, all coming together in one solution. There's a lot of benefits to Jamstack. One of the first ones is security. Depending on how you deploy your stack, you have a smaller attack surface, because if you're just serving up files and you don't have a server-side language, there is less tools for a hacker to tap into. You don't have to, if you're not SSHing into the server, that's one less thing there as well. Also, because each domain is provided by a specialized company, they tend to have the resources to make sure their domain is safe and secure. Performance is also a major benefit as well because pre-rendered views tend to run faster. Basic HTML pages run really, really quick. You also have some more options scalability wise as well, because the view is decoupled from the backend logic so that scaling could simply be adding more servers to your CDN. It's also easier to maintain because, again, you have less server-side things to manage. You have less patches to apply and less applications to upgrade. The portability of the solution is also great because you can host, any hosting provider will be able to give you a solution for serving web pages so that you can go from Netlify to AWS to whatever it is you use. Because it's based on technologies that have been around from the early days of the web, it gets a better set of tools to use, and that leads to a much better developer experience. There are some things to consider when making a decision on your Jamstack. Think about if you prefer to use plugins or if you're fine building things on your own. There are frameworks that use plugins, but they like Gatsby, but they aren't necessarily par for the course. Also think about what technologies you're familiar with. Are you more comfortable with TypeScript than JavaScript? And think about if you're comfortable integrating with APIs. Not just if you could use APIs, but if you know the best practices around using APIs like securing keys and the like. Also think about the kind of developer experience you want, how easy it is to get started, what deployment would look like, what the development workflow would look like, and what the administrative workflow would look like. So that is it that when you make updates to your code and you check it into your source control, it's going to push up a new version of the site? Or is it that you don't want that kind of involvement and you just know that when updates happen, the site will be regenerated on the fly? Also think about how you're going to manage this site and manage content as well. In the JavaScript and markup arena, you have a lot of options. The major three flavors are front-end, client-side rendered solutions, and this is where the application will dynamically call APIs and combine the results with HTML to render an output to the user. You have server-side rendered solutions where this view is pieced together server-side. And then you have static site generators that pre-build the pages and then pushes them up on the server. Each of these solutions have their pros and cons. Client side is good if you need that, if you have dynamic content and you need that flexibility. Server side is better for SEO considerations, but it could be slower. And static site generators are your fastest option, but you get some complexity in figuring out how to re-render or pre-render those pages when you make site updates or you have content updates. Now, you have a lot of front-end choices, and I think a lot of these choices would be familiar to folks. What I did was kind of just try to break them down to help evaluate. So React is a popular solution, but it's not that easy to start. You get in client-side rendering, you get in server-side rendering, but the startup isn't great. Vue is well known for its easy start, and you will get client-side rendering and server-side rendering. Angular is a well-heeled tool by Google, but again, here, not an easy start. You hear a lot of people complain about getting started with Angular. And it seems more for an enterprise team than it would be for somebody now starting a new project and trying to get up and running quickly. Svelte is the new kid on the block, and the cool thing about this one is that it's different from the previous tree in that it uses actually, like vanilla HTML, JavaScript, and it pre-compiles it to that so that you don't have to fight it with JSX. You're not doing anything with shadow DOMs and the like. Other options that have server side, that is static site generators, are like Next.js, a really popular one, and getting more popular by the day. It does static site generation as well as client side, as well as server side. So you don't have to compromise. And it does incremental site generation as well, so that when you make changes, it will not need to generate the entire site. Gatsby is an interesting solution as well, and it's based on React. So as such, it inherits some of Gatsby's React's easy start problems. Jekyll is a good option, and that's what runs GitHub pages. The problem there is that GitHub is not really supporting new things, so you're going to be dependent on the community. And Hugo is a viable option as well. I use it for my blog. You simply update Markdown files, and it generates a new site every time I check those files in. On the API front, you have some considerations there as well. So there are a few different flavors of APIs that you could use. You have representational state transfer, or REST APIs, and these run off a HTTP protocol and really makes use of that protocol by taking advantage of the method that are termed as verbs to indicate what type of action you're gonna take, and the state is represented typically by JSON. GraphQL is a query language for APIs, very intuitive to use. Started out with Facebook, or introduced by Facebook, and it really makes it easy when you don't necessarily know what data is available. It's easy to discover the information that you could retrieve. HTTP APIs are basically APIs that are not RESTful. There are zealots who would say, yes, not all APIs is RESTful, and I am one of those, so that this gets its own line item. gRPC is a remote procedure call framework that is a binary protocol that makes it really quick and fast, and we put it through its paces, and it is, in a lot of instances, almost twice or 4 times as fast than doing a REST API. The caveat with gRPC is that it works off of the HTTP2 protocol, as well as there is some binding in terms of the client and the server, because they both need to support the same objects for communication. On the API front, this is by no means an exhaustive list. There are a ton of APIs you could use. You have the incumbent content management systems going headless and offering headless solutions. So that WordPress has a headless version, Magento has a headless version. We have newcomers like Strapi, which is really good for content management. Some good domain-specific APIs like Algolia are a good option as well for search. Contentful is another domain-specific API that does really well. BigCommerce for e-commerce is popular. Sanity goes for blogs, and Lambda functions. And Lambda functions is really using serverless functions so that you can get discrete functionality. Let's say, for example, you have a form that takes some information and you want to process that information. You could do that in a Lambda and quickly deploy it to AWS, to Google. To learn more about the Jamstack, check out jamstack.org. You could also check out macalliance.org. You can check out this article that does a decent job of explaining the pros and cons of Jamstack. Some of the sites that I've done, so my blog, like I mentioned before, is on Hugo. Our company website is actually a static site, and we made a custom like YAML config that updates that. And when we make updates, it pushes out to the CDN. And shopwithwe.com is also a really good example of an API-driven approach where we have a Chrome extension and a mobile app that operate off an API. I also want to just take a quick peek at Strapi, because this is just to kind of give a sense of what an Jamstack application would look like. Strapi provides a REST API, but even this interface itself is a Jamstack solution. And you could manage articles, you could manage categories, and this is all running off of APIs from Strapi. And you can create new content types. So here we have a new content type that I created called post. It has properties. I could add more properties to it. And it provides the API itself so that I could go to articles and see all the articles in the system. You could do a search for an article, a specific article, right? So that this is a really good example of everything kind of coming together in Jamstack.
Great, great, great. So thank you so much for that talk, Akeem.
Not a problem.
So it's cool because it kind of reflects some of the things that I talked about in my talk about the development of web. And we started at a really static place, and then we thought that dynamic is the way. But then we're trying to scale that out, and it's like, okay, well, static is not so bad, right? So I wonder if you could just give some comments
yeah.
on how we're going back and forth.
Yeah. So it's I mean, that is the story of technology, right? Like everything does come full circle. You know, even back in the day, Java, the company talked a lot about thin client application, and that's where we came back to. And I think the push or the return to the static HTML definitely was the need for speed. I remember I first, kind of got enlightened to that maybe about, I don't want to date myself too much, but about 13 years ago, I was working for True TV, which is owned by that CNN group or Turner Media, and their entire site, which had a bunch of videos and stuff on it, was all static. And the guy who ran that was like a huge proponent of static sites because of that performance. And it was great. You set it up. We had no issues with people trying to hack the site, and that was a kind of property that attracted some, a particular audience that you would have thought they'd have more problems, but it was great. So since then, I've only seen that grow more and more and kind of become more mainstream.
That's awesome. And trying to strike that balance in between, because in my head, practically, I think that could work. If it is, I mean, so if you could just give more context for the audience, a dynamic site, inside the dynamic site is one that
Oh, you're breaking up quite a bit for me, but I think I caught maybe the first part, which is giving context. You said, and maybe if you could put it in the chat, I'll try to make sure I answer it correctly. But The dynamic side definitely would have a lot going on. And I think that's also interesting, right? Because the dynamic side came up, I think, and again, I might be dating myself because I see all of these things happen over the years. But with the rise of the UGC, so that when Facebook and them came out and you had YouTube coming out, like that was the term in the industry, UGC. And anything UGC meant that you wanted it to show up. You couldn't just kind of update a static page. So that also kind of coincided with our Ajax era. So UGC meaning user generated content.
Right.
So because of that, you saw a turn to things like PHP and stuff like that. So and Drupal took off because all these properties wanted comments, they wanted information to be integrated quickly. And to get that kind of dynamic stuff, the server is pulling together information, and every request it's pulling new information. And when you really think about it, it's kind of wasteful because a lot of the page is actually pretty static. Just a few elements you typically find needs to be dynamic, So a lot of times we would make a decision to do a site in PHP just for the simple fact that the user could log in and you wanted to show like the profile bar at the top or something like that. And because of that, you took on a whole set of overhead and a whole set of complexity to get that. So it's been great to see the sobering up and coming back from that, and people kind of leveraging APIs more. Because again, APIs has been around for a long time. One thing I didn't mention in that list was SOAP. Was SOAP out there a long time? So it's just rewrite tools for the right job. And one kind of subtle point I made in the presentation that is important is like the realization nobody really cares how you do it. Users just know they just want it to work, so they don't really care what hoops, what bells, what bells and whistles the solution have. They just want to know it works. So.
Right, but at some extent, that decision might affect the user. So when we talk about scalability, if you put a fully static site versus scale out a dynamic site, and we could talk about the different challenges there.
Yeah. So, well, scaling a static site is just like super easy, right? Because it's just like more servers, more edge servers, more, and again, because that's where the web started, the infrastructure for scaling static sites is there. So like before people knew like AWS and stuff, the biggest name in CDNs was Akamai. So that that business there a long time. When it comes to scaling a dynamic side, that's a different kettle of fish, because you would think that it's just spinning up more servers, but you had to think about how the requests get routed to each server, because some server-side languages, they actually represent states. So it also is affected by how you structure your APIs. Right, so if you have a stateless API, yes, it could kind of scale horizontally. And that kind of falls within that kind of cloud native type architecture. But if you're just doing like stuff like WordPress and stuff, so every time I make a request, you log into WordPress, it's going to create a session. That session is going to be bound to a specific server. So if you don't know what you're doing, somebody might hit another server and their session wouldn't be on that server, and you'd have problems and you'd have a weird experience. So that's where some of the complexity comes from. And then the server run times having to be in sync, so that you don't want to be running one version of PHP on one server and another on another server, and then the site they're working. So that there's all these little complications that people don't really think about off the jump. So it's not as easy as just throwing up new servers with a dynamic site.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note with the static route. With the static site, you're only responsible for that static website, right? The APIs, they figure out scaling, they figure out all the load. So you can never really be bottlenecked by them, as if you're probably doing like even with a headless WordPress, you scale out your front on this CDN, everybody can access it. But then if it's just one WordPress instance or Drupal or Magento, you still get a bottleneck there, right?
Yeah, well, right, exactly. So that you are beholden to the API provider and the quality of the service that they provide, and you know, because yeah, it's not always sunny in Philadelphia, so that it have other drawbacks to the API thing. Not the least of which where you're going to get the functionality you need. Because I think one thing worth considering is when you say, all right, you're going to go Jamstack and you're going to hit everything APIs. Everything had to be APIs. So if you're going to do a blog, yes, you had to find the blog posts and stuff, but you had to figure out what you're going to do for comments and all the other little things that you may not have considered. And I think, like that's why we kind of backed into Jamstack just out of the performance needs that we had for some of our applications. And we realized some of these challenges. And that's like a cool project that I hope to be talking more about at the next DevFest, because we are taking on an ambitious thing we're calling WeOS, where we're trying to build APIs for a lot of use cases that developers need, because I think that's the gap in the Jamstack, like what you're going to do for the A.
Okay, I think I am back.
Yes.
Awesome. So yes, that's all right, and we really look forward to what you all have in store on your end. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of movements, and in terms of client-side rendering, server-side rendering, pre-rendering, it seems to be a problem that many different frameworks and the platform is trying to tackle. So you mentioned things like Vuex. Well, no, you mentioned Next, which is built on React. So we
Yeah,
have these
Nexus, yeah.
there's one called Svelte Kit, which I think just builds on top of Svelte. And they all try to do this thing called hydration. Are you familiar with that term or concept?
Yeah. So that's like the in between, like the full static site generation. Like they try to find a middle ground so that the server side is the less appealing one, because you kind of get the same disadvantages of how PHP sites and stuff like that work right now. But with the static site generation, it is like you're hitting APIs and stuff, but you're using that to then generate the HTML, CSS, and then you put that up. Now, and I wonder if I'm mistaking that, because I think because the hydration is that combining your dynamic data to make the static HTML, if I'm not mistaken. And the Svelte way of doing it is more on the client side, and then the next way of doing it is more the static side generation, if I'm not mistaken. And I could be wrong here, because I came across it, but now I'm like, am I using it in the right place? But I know it's that idea of combining the API data with the HTML to generate the static. And Next does a really good job, because it's saying, hey, you don't need to generate everything. It will just generate the new things. Like if you make an update for a blog post, it'll only generate the one page. So yeah, and that's where the hydration comes from, because you have specific pages or components for a specific page, so that you get a more atomic update than something like Jekyll or Hugo.
Yes, and yeah, we have all these other buzz terms. I believe another word is I think Angular Universal does it. It's also, and you use this other big word called isomorphic JavaScript, where you kind of have UI logic on the back end and then UI logic on the front end. And if I recall correctly, Angular and Next would do this when they perform hydration. When you first visit the site, that's a static rendered by the back end. And then when the site loads, it's a single page app. So every subsequent route is client side rendered. So it's a kind of handoff process happening, and it's really interesting to see.
Yeah, Jira does kind of do that, right? So like you see the page load, and then yeah, as you move around, you see things come in. And the universal is supposed to really be like, hey, you could do either client side or server side. But you see, the thing is, like once you're doing anything dynamic, no matter what you do, I feel you don't get the same performance because at the end of the day, you're generating the paid server side. That's just as bad as before. And I don't want to offend anybody in the Node camp, but Node isn't really great at those things. Like if you've ever really had to scale Node, I think if people were honest with themselves, you had to kind of know what you're doing there. So um, doing things server side with Node is maybe not something I would jump at the bit to do.
Okay, great. Thank you for that contribution. So that brings us just about to the end of this presentation. Thank you so much for being with us, giving us yet another talk, Akeem. And
thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. So, and we will see you all in the next session. All right, so for the next talk, we have Penelope de Freitas, who is lecturer at the University of Guyana, and she will be getting into the building of ICT skills for professional development. So without further ado, let's get into that talk.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is my esteemed pleasure to be sharing with you some of my experiences working collaboratively with partners on ICT training initiatives in Guyana. I am proud to be representing the University of Guyana's Department of Computer Science, through which all of the highlighted projects are being co-managed. My presentation will take on the following outline. Firstly, I will share a background as it relates to the need for ICT training initiatives. Next, I will talk about some notable collaborators I have worked with and provide examples of the projects we've partnered on. I will also highlight the Google tools and platforms that have supported our needs. And finally, I will share the general lessons learned from these projects and provide an update on the next steps for the various initiatives. To give a general background to the issues surrounding ICT, I will share some facts with you. Statistics show that the world is projected to have a deficit in ICT professionals. For instance, Europe is projected to have 1.67 million unfilled vacancies by 2025. In fact, this demand will further increase by 2030, with 90% of jobs requiring digital skills and 50% of current jobs being transformed due to automation. Given this impending deficit of ICT skills, it is increasingly important to fast-track greater representation of individuals in the field. Examining global statistics more closely reveal that there is a severe underrepresentation of females in the field of ICT. Locally, between 2009 and 2020, male graduates outnumbered females in the computer science department at the University of Guyana. During this period, the highest percentage of female graduates was 38.6%. Similarly, persons with disabilities represent another minority group in the ICT profession. As such, the inspiration for the projects that will be highlighted in this presentation were drawn from the projected ICT skills deficit for the next decade, as well as the alarming global and national statistics on disparities in the field. In an effort to drive more national ICT training, especially upskilling initiatives, the Department of Computer Science has been collaborating with several partners. For instance, We tend to collaborate with our student body, clubs like the UG Robotics Club, as well as our alumni to support community training and research initiatives. We found that our students have already developed a strong foundation in ICT, whereas our graduates, many of whom are employed with the industry, also offer rich value from their real-world exposure. We've also found value in partnering with local entities, such as the former Ministry of Public Telecommunications, the current Office of the Prime Minister, and the Guyana Council of Organizations for Persons with Disabilities, the GCOPD. Interestingly, we've also caught the attention of regional partners like the Caribbean School of Data and the University of the West Indies, Mona School of Business and Management. I will now share with you a range of notable projects that the previously mentioned partners co-managed with the Department of Computer Science. One of the projects that we are especially proud of is the Guyanese Girls Code program. The idea behind this project was born out of the low enrollment and graduation statistics of females in the department, as well as the severe underrepresentation of females around the globe in the ICT field. This project is government funded. For instance, the former Ministry of Public Telecommunications supported it through 2018 onto 2020, and now in 2021, it is being supported by the Office of the Prime Minister. The Guyanese Girls Code program targets females from grades 5 to 10 and is geared at introducing them to the field of ICT with special emphasis on skills like problem solving and programming. The department has also worked along with local interest groups like the GCPOD to empower individuals with disabilities. One of the recent initiatives trained a group of participants with disabilities such as visual impairments and cerebral palsy. This upskilling project introduced participants to the world of web development, whereby they were trained to create simple websites using HTML and CSS. They also collaborated in teams to produce websites using authoring tools like Google Sites. Last but not least, we have partnered with the Caribbean School of Data and University of the West Indies to run their Digital Literacy and Data Fundamentals Training Program. This project is Google funded and empowers young adults to build their digital capacities in areas like productivity tools, data analysis, and web authoring. The program is heavily concentrated on exposing participants to Google products. This program is also being run in other Caribbean territories such as Jamaica, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and Trinidad and Tobago. I'm also proud to report that staff, current students, and alums of the Department of Computer Science have served as trainers, assistants, and guest speakers in all of these projects. Without their support, we would not have been able to reach the wide target group of participants. Either by curriculum design or convenience, we've come to rely on a range of Google platforms and tools to support our training needs. Some of these tools include the Google Classroom for managing learning materials and assessments, Google's Data Studio for monitoring our students' progress through dashboards, Google Forms for creating quizzes and activities and collecting student feedback, like their experiences, their attendance data, and weekly updates. We've also used Google's productivity tools like Google Sheets and Google Docs for supporting in-class and out-of-class collaborative activities. Google Sites was employed for creating the students' virtual portfolios. They also created various types of websites such as blogs, storefronts, and community pages. Another new tool that we've been incorporating into some of our sessions is Google Maps, accompanied by Android apps like Maps.me for working with geospatial data. In terms of lessons learned, we found that working with the various Google platforms and tools that were previously mentioned brought tremendous value to our training projects, from monitoring students' progress to managing our records, students' assessments, and engagement activities. Our students found these tools to be easy to use with a shallow learning curve. Out of all the groups we worked with, the participants with disabilities were initially the most challenging to work with. Nonetheless, the target group presented many opportunities for the trainers to think outside the box. We also engaged in careful thought, planning, research, and even spoke with experts in the area to gain insights into techniques for mentoring the target group. On the whole, we were reminded that there is strength in numbers, and we're fortunate to pull together an awesome team of partners, experts, trainers, and assistants to help us realize our project goals. In addition, we never lost sight of the individuals who are benefiting from these initiatives and reminded ourselves to constantly adopt a human-centered approach. As an update, I'm happy to report that over the past 3 years, the Department of Computer Science at the University of Guyana, along with our partners, which includes the Ministry of Public Telecommunications, Office of the Prime Minister, GPCOT, Curtin School of Data, and our alums, have trained 400 plus young Guyanese adults on these special ICT training initiatives. However, about a year and a half ago, we had reached a standstill when the pandemic hit us. It took us quite some time to rebuild courage, rethink our engagement strategies, as well as the mode of delivery, which was mostly face-to-face to begin with, and in some cases, blended. Thankfully, we were able to dust ourselves off and continue the projects with a resounding success. Attrition rates have been very low and student feedback extremely positive. For instance, our participants have expressed interest in taking follow-on courses, and some have even enrolled for STEM and ICT-related degrees at the University of Guyana or other institutions of higher learning. Fortunately, forums such as these allow the department to share our stories. We have also taken additional steps to share our findings in international journals, such as IEEE. In fact, I'm currently co-authoring a few papers, which we intend to publish by early 2022. In closing, I'd like to express sincere appreciation to the Google DevFest organizers for this wonderful opportunity. And I'd also like to express a special thank you to the viewers for listening to my presentation.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Penelope de Freitas. That's an excellent story. That's so inspiring to hear. And we believe stories like that is right at home at this year's DevFest, given the theme that it's everyone's DevFest. Unfortunately, due to a mix-up on my part, I apologize for Penelope isn't able to be here with us to do a Q&A. However, it's likely that this isn't the last we want to see of her, because we have an extended event coming up, which y'all can stay tuned for on our various social media channels. So that about takes us to the end of this morning session, at least. Look, if you were to look down over here, you can see the link to RSVP and to get access and see the agenda of this afternoon session. Just like this morning, many amazing speakers, many amazing talks. Please join us later today. And that's it for now. See you all in the next one.